Blink Respawn was incredible. I met up with some old friends, met up new ones. I got to say, the community is awesome, one of a kind. The energy at this event, electric, epic, godlike even. But the games were pretty top tier, world class. And I managed to pick up some tips and tricks, some stuff that I learned in my journey that I wanted to talk about with you guys. Hello, by the way, my name is Fidelity. And let's talk some Street Fighter. The thing that I stuck with the most in this event was the sheer importance of being able to set up big damage in the game. Because of the way Ed works and the way his buttons work and how combo conversions work, I valued too much the pressure game, and that would cost me the games. Because the thing about Ed's pressure is that it's rather weak. Yeah, a lot of his normals, when done on block, they're negative. However, if I use his lights, you know, the things that allow me to set up layers, I wouldn't get much damage. I would get very negligible damage. Just look at the damage from this. Arguably one of his most reliable max damage light hit confirms. It's just 1590. I have to hit you like 50 billion times in order to kill you. And if I drive rush, it's no much better. It's actually not better. You know, I get 1477 damage into a safe jump or something. It's kind of trash. You know, and if I don't use meter, I can use the drive rush to set up pressure. Yeah, but the same problem is still there. You know, I wouldn't get much damage from my mix-up and advantageous situation. So that got me thinking, like, goddamn, like, what am I supposed to do then? And I kind of just gravitated to use his crouching medium kick, because on a baseline, you get some pretty good damage into a safe jump, you know, or you can even drive rush into big damage. But the real kicker was in its counter hit conversion. Yeah, whenever you got this into counter hit, you got into a really big, beefy, juicy combo, and you need that type of damage in game. You know, if you're gonna be using my old strategy and okay, well, I'm gonna focus on the pressure strings, be able to set up layers, well, that's not good enough. Because it doesn't matter how many layers you have on block. If I need to hit them 6 or 7 times, and the opponent just needs to hit me twice, then what's the point? I've lost the plot, you know? And that was a big hurdle that kind of stumped me in Blink. But once I started using the crouching beating kick and actually getting that good damage in, I was winning some rounds, especially in the casual sets after the fact, after playing in tournament. And I thought, I'm like, god damn, well, this button really cooks. I was using this move in 2 particular ways, fairly simple. The first one is the most important one, and it's to stop delay teching. Delay teching is the most prevalent defensive technique in all Street Fighter 6 right now. This is super strong, and everybody was using it. So I put the dummy, I block a perfect meaty, and if I go for a meaty throw, he techs. You know, that's the use of delay tech. That's why it's so powerful. So what I would do is just delay my crouching medium kick, and I would get good damage that way. You know, delay, big combo, and banger. Extremely powerful. That was the main way to do it, because if I delayed my crouching medium kick, and they were using delay tech, which was practically everybody, I basically guaranteed a counter hit setup. It would keep them honest. It would make sure that they would respect my throw mix-up afterwards. Incredibly strong. The second way that I would use this move was as a perfect meaty setup, because sometimes people wouldn't just block. You know, they wanted to jump out, they wanted to mash backdash, and sometimes you gotta keep them still. And that's also, even though it's not as important as stopping delay tech, which is the main way of defending, it's still quite important, okay? So I'm gonna put the dummy to backwards jump and banger. You know, if I do it a little better, it would stop them, and incredibly powerful, really strong. And the same thing would apply if they would mash backdash. If they mash a backdash, it would just stop them. And some people like to mash it. So this one move, really good as a perfect meaty, but it shouldn't be the cornerstone of your game plan because delay tech exists. But once you start delaying your crouching medium kick, then I started having a pretty solid game plan. Yeah, and those are the rounds that I would win. You know, I would catch and counter hit, I would get big damage, and they would be scared. And then the throw would actually work a lot more often. So yeah, the lights are good, the lights are important, but it's very, very important to have big damage. You need to have big damage. If you don't have big damage, there's nothing to be scared of. And I felt like crouching mini kick was my unsung hero. I needed to use it, and whenever I did, I would get a lot more wins. One quick interesting thing that I learned pressuring with this move is that a lot of people autopilot their defensive counter pokes. Or not really counter pokes, but they're counter attacking, yeah? Because every time you pressure with a light, and it's not another light that's chainable, well, it's a link. Like if I do this, I'll get interrupted every time if he mashes immediately. And the thing about this move is that a lot of people would, since I'm still kind of close, a lot of people will interrupt that way. So something that kind of helped me is using that gap between the lights to my favor. Because if I'm playing like a character like, let's say, Cammy, or against a Ken, and they go jab into medium, well, I could always interrupt with my crouching light kick if there's a gap in there, and I would get this combo, because a crouching light kick on counter hit is going to be more advantageous, with enough advantage to actually land a drive rush into a standing medium punch, which is pretty goated, to be honest. And you would get big damage, a lot of reward. It's very explosive too, because they don't expect it. It's like, oh man, it's supposed to be my turn, and I'm getting cooked for it. And I thought it was a fairly interesting thing to share. Like, I got a lot of good wins interrupting in that way, using crouching mini kick. Obviously, don't autopilot it like that. But if the opponent is autopiloting their pressure or defensive counter-attacking, do that, man. Cook them. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of related to the first thing. Me personally, I love to use delay tech on offense. It can be fairly strong because it's very safe and consistent. Let me explain why. If I use delay tech on their offense, I'm going to block the first few frames. So if they decide to DP, well, I fucked it up there, but if they decide to DP, well, I'm going to block. You see in the command history, I did the throw input. That's because I did it delayed. And I can defend against a lot of stuff, because if they go for their own delay tech, you know, I can still tech their own throw. And if they do nothing, well, that's the best case scenario, because then I just outright win, you know? So delay tech on offense can be very safe and consistent and strong. But when playing against some players, particularly the Mexican Kusanagi, he did something very interesting. He would do a delayed crouching jab, and that would cook me all day, because every time I went for the delay tech throw, I would get counter hit into whatever combo that he did. So what I ended up doing was falling into the same answer that I explained with you guys, the crouching mini kick, because then I would get big damage that way. And if I actually get a trade with his jab, I get a pretty good combo. You know, the same combo as I would normally on counter hit, which was pretty great, pretty fantastic even. And in Kusanagi's case, what he would mix is his DP. So I would have a very black and white game with him. I would like either beat him and get the counter hit combo, or I would just get hit by the DP. And that mix, that risk and reward would be slightly in my favor, because if I got hit by the DP, it wouldn't be that much damage, and the Oki is kinda bad. But if I got the hit, well, it would be party time. I would get a gajillion damage into corner carry into death. You know, so on defense, I thought that technique was very interesting, because when you play someone like me, and they would autopilot, you know, the pussy stuff, like I was scared, and they would do delay tech on offense, well, delay jab is a pretty good option, and I'm gonna start using it from now on, because some players like to use that technique, like myself. So yeah, if you see someone that's using delay tech on their offense and they want to guard against the DP and they're a pussy, do delay jab. You'll counter hit them a lot. It's a very interesting and powerful tool to use on your defense. The third thing that came to mind when playing in Blink was just a couple pros and cons of Ed's Fireball. This move was kind of another unsung hero for me, especially when playing against players that aren't at the top level, just a little bit below that, because this move is incredibly strong at checking drive rushes. And I didn't know that, to be honest. Like, I was mainly just using it as a way to set up a slow traveling projectile on the screen. You know, I can set up plus frames that way, pretty strong. But if you're playing against someone and they start to get nervous, a little antsy, and they start drive rushing against you, something that happened quite a bit was that they would land with the first part of the fireball and I would get a combo just like so. And that happened so many times. It happened in so many games. People would just not know what to do, and I would just drive rush, and then they would get hit, it would land meaty, and bang, and I would get a combo. And I wasn't even looking for it. Incredibly strong, and it really goes to show just how reliable of a move this fireball can be. But once you started playing against like the real tryhards, like, oh my god, like I can't do shit against these people, like Blaz comes to mind, right? Once you started using this move, it would lose to sweep, and they would do it like on reaction. And it's something weird with his fireball because his hurt box is a little more forward than the fireball. Like if they do him normal, it won't really clash with the fireball itself, it would hit me instead. Let me show you. Like, you see, like the sweep doesn't really hit or clash against the fireball, it just hits me. So when I played someone like Blaz, and I would like wanted to use the fireball in the neutral, he would just scope it out all day. He would see this, and then I would get cooked all day on reaction. So it was a good move to really gauge the player's skill, even because it was like, okay, can you react to this move or can you not? If you can't, it was so easy to win the neutral, extremely easy. But if you can, it kind of forced me to play it in more honest game. Like, okay, then I'm gonna stop using this then, and I'm gonna start using my normals then and playing that footsie game, which is hard against these players, you know? I just thought it was very interesting. So Ed's fireball is a very good way to gauge the opponent's skill, and especially if they're antsy, because if they are, they're gonna run into your fireball if they drive rush in. But if they aren't antsy and they have the reactions of a god, well, you can get cooked pretty reliably. So that mind game or that interaction was very interesting to me, and I'll never forget it. So it really goes to show how strong of a move this fireball is as well, because it takes a load of these players' brains. Like Blaz was scoping out this move all day, and that made it so whenever I did start to use the normals had more weight to them because that's not where his focus was. So I thought that was very interesting, and something that also happened against Blaz particularly was when he was very hyper focused on this one move, right? And then once we started using those normals, whenever I used the fireball, sometimes he would whiff. Sometimes he wouldn't get the reaction in time and I would get the whiff punish in. So using this fireball is very important in the game, and coming from Blink now, I have a newfound appreciation for this move. Like, it's insanely powerful, especially because of a light one, how slow it can travel. So if you're an Ed player, like, use this move, play around with this move more, and really get accustomed to using it in range, a little close, and use it as a way to gauge players' skill, because it's extremely powerful. The fourth topic I wanted to talk about were some of the defensive habits I came across playing some of the players that are Blink. Particularly from Lugabo, I played quite a bit with him. He's very young, one of the best players in Mexico. He was cooking at his World Warrior, and I think he's like 15, 16. He came with his dad. Very respectful, very awesome people, but he did some pretty mean shit, man. He did some pretty nasty stuff in-game, and particularly it was with how he was using backdash. There was a supreme mastery with how he was using backdash. Let me explain. In the corner, right, when people are using the jabs, right? When you're at this range and you can't chain any more jabs, well, people would normally take their turn back, right? And something that happened sometimes is that if I try to take my turn with like a medium kick, for example, he could backdash and the medium kick would whiff. Like so. And it didn't really, that type of situation where he would backdash and my button just wouldn't reach happened so many times. So many times. And by itself, it's actually not that bad because, you know, he's not going to punish me, he's backdashing. But the thing about it is that if I did a slow normal like standing medium kick, or if I even slightly delayed it just a little bit, he would add drive rush right behind it. And there's some kind of mental pressure, some mental fuckery that would happen that would be so frustrating to play against. Because since I pressed the standing medium kick and I'm recovering in that, if he did drive rush right after it, like I wouldn't really have enough time to check it. And it would just be so overwhelming and so destructive that he would have that type of pressure all day. And it's not like he autopilot that all the time. He's a smart dude. Sometimes he would do like the triple light and then he would just play with his buttons, right? Or do some EX run shenanigan. But the fact that he would do backdash and play with the drive rush really shook me to my core, because I had to be worried about so many stuff. And the thing about drive rushes is that it's so quick. Like, I can't really check it reliably like that. So the pressure of the move, like whiffing and then adding the drive rush behind that, it was so incredibly scary. And Lugabo wasn't really the only one using this technique. Kusanagi also used this technique with Terry. Let me show you. I'm gonna switch characters real quick. Okay, now that I have Terry on the screen, Kusanagi used it in a different way. He didn't really use it in pressure strings, but he used it a lot in neutral, because Terry's thing is like the burn knuckle. Yeah, the burn knuckle, if you hit it on its tippy toe, it can be plus on block or safe, right? And the thing about backdash is that since it's so quick, Kusanagi would place himself right in the normal footsie range, and when playing at this range, when he would backdash, the burn knuckle would be perfectly spaced so that he would land it plus on block. So it would be incredibly tough. I would have to play extra close to him because there's no real way I can reliably look at his backdash. And again, much like Lugabo, he has a brain. He's not a headless chicken playing the game. Like, if he's gonna backdash, he knows I'm gonna be looking for the burn knuckle. So I can't just like look for backdash and drive impact, or look for backdash and do something else. He could backdash into projectile, or hell, even the EX projectile, which is Omega Plus, a la Jury. So yeah, it was incredibly strong. It really goes to show how there's a lot of ways that I personally don't know how to use the backdash. Yeah, the backdash can be a way to set up stuff in the neutral, to set up stuff in pressure, because much like how Lugabo was using it, the backdash can be a way to set up a whiff, add some mental pressure for the drive rush, or even land a punish counter if they're late on a button press. And like Kusanagi, the backdash can be a way to set up stuff in the neutral that couldn't be set up from this close range, you know? Like, for example, I was talking about Ed's fireball. If I backdash into the fireball, that could be something new, you know? I have to brainstorm, think about ideas, but I just thought it was very interesting that these two players really allowed me to see how backdash can be a great way to not just defend, but to set up offense as a placement tool, and as a timing tool, as a tool to really set up something. And I thought that was very interesting. Another defensive habit that I took note of was when I played Not Pedro. He's an incredible Ken player, and he also plays Terry. He's a young blood from Brazil. Super funny dude also. But when I played against him, he did a very particular defensive string, or offensive string, which was standing heavy punch into crouching medium punch at that range, you know, kind of far away. And on paper, it's kind of a dumb move to go for. Like, standing heavy punch is not plus on block. It's negative, it's not his turn. And crouching medium punch, it doesn't even reach at this range. But the thing about it is that when playing a character like Ed, when playing against an Ed player, his moves are long reaching, yeah, but they're kind of slow. So when doing a sequence like this, a lot of the times, they would just hit me on startup. So I would get very scared to actually take my turn back. Because at any point, if he went for the crouching medium punch and I did an immediate button, I would just lose and I would get hit on counter hit. And that applies to every slow but long reaching normal. Like Ed's heavy kick, Ed's stand heavy punch, like all of those normals, that would apply, yeah? And my only answer to that was to let the move whiff, like let the crouching medium punch whiff and then whiff punish it. And that's incredibly hard to do. Extremely possible, but you have to be very aware of it. And the thing about this is that Not Pedro is not, he's dumb. Not Pedro's not dumb. He knows how to play the game. So once he realized that I was whiff punishing it, he just stopped doing it. And instead, he would press heavy punch again. Instead, he would press crouching medium kick into Jinrai. And it was so relentless, so offensive, that I was so scared of taking my turn back. So if you play one of these characters and you have one of these crouching medium punches, and you have a way to set up a situation where you're like negative but not that negative, I would suggest employing this crouching medium punch game plan. So yeah, on paper it doesn't really reach, but on in practice, it stops so many things and gives you such scary pressure that you should be using it. And I thought that was very interesting and a very strong way of playing the game. So Ed can't really use that, but if you play a character that can, you should. It's pretty strong. The last point that I want to bring home is a little bit more psychological in nature. I've come to realize that if you're going to be playing in tournament and you have a strong base game plan, you really have to be stubborn about it. And you just have to use it willy-nilly, okay? But the important part comes in the first initial interaction of using that game plan. Right, in neutral, in pressure, and in mix-ups, you really have to keep in mind the first interaction. Why? Because it almost feels like those interactions are going to define whatever else happens in tournament. A new relationship between you and the opponent, not more so the characters, but you and the opponent are now formed, and those interactions are going to be the baseline, the life of the whole match, okay? So whenever something happens, you have to attack it directly, you know, extremely, because that's going to be the only real data that you're going to be getting in tournament. You only get a first to 2, or if you make top 8, you only get a first to 3. So you have to assume that sprinkle in some interaction, give him some time, and you put your opponent in the same interaction. Whatever happened is going to happen again, okay? Let me give you an example. Like, this example is not unique to this, okay? But if you notice that the opponent blocks 3 lights, yeah? And he does a counterattack immediately, you have to assume that, like I said, you sprinkle in some interactions, give him some time. If you put him in that interaction again, he's gonna press again, and you have to attack that directly, okay? And that goes for any type of interaction in neutral, in the game, okay? So, let's say you have a regular game plan, right? And you melee with crouching medium kick, and then you also melee with throw. If you see that at the beginning, the opponent presents EXDP, you have to assume that that's in their nature. In your match between you and him, that EXDP is now real. So whatever you do in your offense has to keep that in mind. Because when push comes to shove, and he gets nervous, and he starts thinking, and he gets more antsy and anxious, he's going to present that EXDP again. Now let's take an example in the neutral, which is arguably the most important part of the game. Okay? Let's say Fireball Drive Rush, very common situation in the game. If you notice that the opponent can lose to Drive Rush Throw, you have to assume that in the tournament, during the match, you have to present that because he's going to be eating the throw more often than you would think. So if you notice that he's not really pressing any button and then he gets hit by the throw, you have to attack that directly, okay? You have to, because that's the only data you have in the game. Inversely, like, if you see, right, that the opponent blocks and then he immediately presses the button, let me put Light Punch, okay? And that's common in your game, you have to assume that that interaction is going to happen again, okay? So whenever you play against them, play to beat that directly, specifically, because in its most natural form, in the relationship between you and the opponent, that's what he wants to do. That's what his natural self wants to do, okay? So you have to attack that directly, no ifs, ands, or buts. So if he mashes buttons there, you hit him. But you have to keep that in mind. You have to really keep in mind the interactions that happen in the game. Because if you don't, you lose that data, and then bang, you lost the first to 2, shake my hand, and now you're back on the flight back home. So that about wraps up everything I had to say about Blink Respawn 2025. The things I learned, the things I thought about, and I wanted to share that with all of you guys here today. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If I sparked some type of discussion on whether this is bad, whether this is good, let me know how you feel, truly, in the heart. Leave a like or a dislike, and sub if you want more content like this one here today. I love all of you.